If I may have your attention, we'll call this meeting to order. This is the September meeting of the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Ralph Robinette. I am chairman of the commission and will be chairing this meeting. We will now introduce other commissioners, city staff, and our council liaison. Councilman.
Rick Mihalovich, Council Liaison, 2nd Ward.
Dale Vaughn.
Bob George.
Jack Deacon.
Ann Strotman.
Dave Nunn.
Bunny Tricky Cotton.
Chris Jordan.
Eric Barron.
Matt Marash, the city engineer.
Drew Hilpert, city attorney.
Janice McMillan, Planning Director.
The city code authorizes 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Alternates are designated to vote upon the absence or disqualification of regular members. A quorum consists of 5 members or alternates to conduct business. I hereby declare a quorum is present. Absent tonight are Commissioners Dean DeToy, Michael Lester, and Chris Yarnell. Are there any members who wish to disqualify themselves from voting on any of the agenda items tonight? Seeing none. We will now have the call for cases. If you are here, you do not have to come forward. Just indicate that someone is here to present this case. Case number P12012, 3110 Algoa Road rezoning. Is anyone here to, okay. Case number P12013, 1404 Karen Drive rezoning. P12014, 305 and 307 Flora Drive rezoning. Case P12015 zoning text amendment. I assume staff is here for that?
Yes, I think Mr. Hilpert would be representing that.
All right, case number P12016 preliminary subdivision plot of Log Ridge subdivision. Okay. Do any of you wish to request a continuance tonight? Seeing none, we will now go forward. Procedural matters, staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to briefly describe the procedures of the Planning Commission. The proceedings of the meeting are being recorded, so I ask that when you speak, please step to the microphone and give your name and address for the record. After a brief introduction by city staff, the applicant and applicant's consultants and advisors will explain the project. The opening presentation by the applicant shall be limited to 10 minutes, and the applicant shall be given 3 additional minutes for closing testimony if so requested. We will then ask to hear from any supporters of the request. We will then ask to hear from any opponents of the request, and we will then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. The testimony from supporters, opponents, or other interested parties shall be limited to 3 minutes each, and rebuttal testimony shall be limited to 5 minutes unless permission is granted by the Commission for additional time. City staff will then describe the proposal and make the recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, reference to printed material, including the staff reports, applicable findings, ordinances, and/or statutes, shall not be read into the record unless directed by the Commission. And the staff reports and recommendations, if any, on the matter before the Commission shall be presented to the Commission before the Commission acts on the matter. The Commission will then close testimony from the floor. And prior to motion or discussion on the case, the Commission will discuss the proposal and publicly make its determination with reasons. The form of the motion shall be positive. That is, the motion shall be made to accept the request as presented or with modifications, stipulations, or conditions, and a final vote will then be taken, ayes in favor, nays opposed. And the chairman shall announce the results of the vote, specifying the number of votes cast in favor and the number of votes cast against. The following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting: the City Code as amended, the Comprehensive Plan and Land Use Map, copies of applications under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, the affidavit of publication of the public notice in the newspaper, the copies of drawings, plans, and our renderings under consideration, the letters or memoranda from staff, the staff reports, the minutes of proceedings, the letters, photos, memoranda, or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, and the rules of procedure for the Jefferson City, Missouri Planning and Zoning Commission. These items are public record and are available for inspection in the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the Office of the City Clerk. And please be advised that any items that are presented, distributed, or circulated or otherwise received pertaining to the cases under consideration tonight become the property of the Commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, renderings, petitions, and letters.
Commissioners, you have a copy of the agenda before you. We have no request for continuance, therefore the chair would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as printed.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The agenda is adopted. Also, Commissioners, you have in your packet the minutes from the August meeting, if you would like just a few moments to look at those. Chair would entertain a motion at this time to approve the minutes as they are presented.
I'd move we approve the minutes as presented.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as presented. All indicate the favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The minutes are approved. Also in your packet, we do have some correspondence received. If you've not had an opportunity to look at it when you get time here, you may want to take a look at it. We'll give you just about a minute here to look at it if you want to look at it before we start. New business. First case, P12012 3110 Algoa Road rezoning from C1 in RU to RS2 and RU in Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Who is here to present that case?
If I could, very briefly, Mr. Chairman, go over the case. Up on a screen is a location map and zoning map showing the area. The location or the property's highlighted with hatch marks. The property is located on Algoa Road, just over a quarter mile east of East McCarty Street, and is a very minor zoning request in that it's to consolidate the zoning of the property in order to accommodate a single family home. The history of the zoning, as you can see, the property has three separate zoning districts on it. A C1 zoning, an RS2 zoning, and an RU zoning. And this is really a relic from the fact that the city limit line used to go through the property right about there. And when the property was annexed into the city, the zoning was established separately from what existed on the other side of the city limit line. The request is basically to consolidate the zoning and approve a comprehensive plan amendment in order to support the requested rezoning. I do have an aerial photo that basically shows the lot that the farmer would like to divide off of his farm in order to build a new single-family home for a relative, I believe. And a small portion of the zoning, well, up on the screen is a page contained within your packets that actually has the technical details on what would be rezoned to what. But basically, the lot that's proposed for a single-family home would be rezoned to consolidate under RS2 single-family, and then a small portion of commercial zoning that exists on the farmer's farm would be rezoned to rural in order to match the rest of the farm. That's really all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I believe that Mr. Bates is here and could answer any questions that you have as well.
All right, we have any questions of staff at this time? Okay, we'll now go to the public testimony. Mr. Bates.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Bates, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. As Eric said, this is really an effort to clean up some old zoning. Several years ago, we split the Engelbrecht farm. This was an old, large farm, split it, and it was sold off in large tracts. Mr. Strope and his wife bought a considerable amount of that acreage. Subsequently, prior to this, I think a son has built on an estate lot, and this would be the same thing. We've done the parcel division, which is an administrative process, and during that process we found that the zoning lines do not follow the property lines as they exist now. And in addition, Eric said that the annexation has really changed the entire picture here. So I'll be happy to answer any questions. This is more of a clerical issue, and the homes that are being built really fit with the neighborhood. Mr. Strope, his wife are here, and I think the family members, so I'm sure they'd be happy to add to the testimony if you would like.
Any questions of Mr. Bates? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone else here who would like to speak in favor of this request? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this request? Seeing none, we will close the public testimony. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The requested rezoning and comprehensive plan amendment would be in line with this pattern within that area, and staff does support the request. Be happy to answer any additional questions.
Any questions of staff? I believe you want us to do this in form of two motions, Eric?
Yes, if you could.
Okay. All right, we will do two motions, one to approve the comprehensive plan amendment, and then the other to approve the request to rezone the property. Who would want to offer the first motion?
I would move to approve make an amendment to the comprehensive plan that would show the property as low-density residential.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Dave, you want to try the second motion?
I would move to approve the rezoning as requested in the presentation.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion unanimously passes. Case P 12013, staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for 1404 Karen Drive. It's a comprehensive plan amendment from low-density residential to high-density residential, and a rezoning from RS4, which is a single-family residential zoning district, to RA2, which is a multifamily residential zoning district. Up on a screen is a location map of the area that also shows the zoning. First, to orient you to where this property is, toward the lower part of the screen, you'll see where East High Street and East McCarty Street connect, basically right beside Warwick Village. And if you were to travel west on East High Street and turn onto Riverside Drive, and then make the first turn onto Karen Drive, you would drive straight into the property. That is the way that it is accessed from Karen Drive off of Riverside Drive. Now, the interesting thing is that Karen Drive is a street built to city standards only up to Taylor Street. After Taylor Street, it basically is a driveway. It's about 10 feet wide. It's maintained by city staff or by city street crews, but it is only takes on the character of a driveway rather than a city street, and has been that way for a very long time. This property, which is highlighted on the screen, and the applicant actually owns some extra property. I have a visual here in a moment that'll show you that. But the property is currently zoned RS for single-family residential. And the purpose of the request is to establish a multifamily zoning on just a portion of the applicant's property. in order to accommodate a development plan that consists of 7 fourplex residential buildings. In order to do this, the property owner, the applicant, would construct a new cul-de-sac street in the place of the current driveway style street. The new cul-de-sac would be built to current standards, street standards in terms of width, etc. And in order to accommodate that, there is an existing house on the corner of Taylor Street and Karen Drive. And if you look at my mouse, is located right there. That would be demolished in order to accommodate the right-of-way width. In order to get the proper width, the applicant would need to demolish the house. The next slide shows the 2011 aerial photo of the property. Now I've got 2 different colors up on the screen. The yellow area is the portion of the applicant's property that they're requesting to rezone to the multifamily residential. And the blue portion is other property that the applicant owns, but is proposed to remain as a single-family residential. Along with the rezoning application, the applicant submitted a development plan, a sketch development plan for the property. This plan shows a proposed cul-de-sac street, shows a number of fourplex residential buildings off of it, and then a couple of single-family buildings. And I have another visual that shows the area outlined in green is the area that is actually being proposed for a multifamily use. So this is the area that's actually proposed to be rezoned. It's important to note that while the applicant submitted the sketch development plan with the rezoning application, this is only an example of how the property could be developed if the rezoning proposal is approved. And while the developer would most likely develop the property similar to what's shown on this plan, they could certainly change it in any manner that they wish, as long as it's still consistent with the zoning of the property. I do have several pictures. The first one is a picture of Karen Drive. Now, the picture's taken the portion of Karen Drive that's in the foreground here is the portion built to city standards. And so you can see how the road narrows to basically looking like a driveway. But that is a street that's maintained by city crews. And this is another picture further up Karen Drive on the property, still looking east. Again, it takes on the appearance of a driveway, but this shows 2 existing single-family residential houses that access off of that road. And then I have a third picture of the house that's located on the corner of Karen Drive and Taylor Street that would be the applicant is proposing to demolish in order to make room for the street right-of-way. And one note, I think I may have inaccurately represented the requested rezoning. The request is to rezone the property to RA1, which is still a multifamily residential zoning district. And I apologize for that. I often get the RA1 and RA2 districts confused, but the request is for an RA1 zoning district, which allows up to 12 housing units per acre in terms of density. And I think that's all I have for right now. I'd be happy to answer any initial questions that you have.
Have any questions of staff at this time? Chris?
Eric, I don't know if this is something that you provided or the consultant or who, but at the back of our packet is and I don't want to confuse the issue, but the back of our packet that was laying on the table when we got here is a alternate subdivision plan. Are you aware of that, and how does that relate to what we're going through tonight?
No, I have not even had a chance to look at that. Tonight is the first time I've seen that.
Okay, maybe we'll get that addressed from whoever's here.
Yes, I hope so.
All right.
Any other questions of staff at this time? Okay, we'll start the public testimony. Who is here to present this case?
I'm Shannon Block, and I live at 5422 Aberdeen Way, outside of the city limits. This is my property, and I've hired Mr. Bates and Central Missouri Professionals to... Yeah, maybe, is that any better? Okay. My name is Shannon Block. Did you get that part? Okay. All right. Yeah, this is my property. I purchased it in October of last year. Bought it through real estate, and saw a lot of potential in the house for starters at 1404 Karen for updating and the resale of it. What attracted me the most to the property was, though, somewhat level street going in, the nice private setting that's back there, tree-lined property, and it's my full intention to keep it that way as this plan shows. I think I'll turn things over to Mike and answer any questions you might have of me.
Do we have any questions of Mr. Block at this time? Okay, thank you. Mr.
Okay.
Bates?
Mr. Chairman, Mike Bates, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. As Mr. Block said, and I think some of you old-timers will remember that this was originally the Buell Backley's property. He lived there for many years, at least that's the way I recall it, and the potential for development was always limited because the existing driveway, which is maintained by the city, is basically an alley, or an alley standard. And without the purchase of 1323 Karen, the potential for redevelopment or infill development really didn't exist. And when Mr. Block came to us, that there was some potential to rehab the existing home, but his interest in an investment property was limited by that, which he was able to deal with that. We've shown that on Exhibit 1 with the primary acreage and then the 1323 Karen Drive. Exhibit 2 gives you the overall layout with surrounding zoning. As you can see, the existing residence that was occupied by Mr. Backley's would remain RS4, and then there would be 2 additional lots created that exceed the RS4 requirement, but those would face the existing residential on the private drive. That's Exhibit 2. Exhibit 3 gives you without the zoning overlay, gives you a better picture of what exists there. 1404 is the existing house. It would include creating an additional 9 lots to add to the 1 lot that would be platted for the existing residence at 1404 Karen Drive. Exhibit 4 is, we just come out from that so you get a little bit of a better picture of what the development looks like as it fits into the neighborhood. Exhibit 5 is a close-up of that, again showing the development that would be built with the platting of the subdivision, and of course platting would require us to come back through the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Council. Exhibit 6 is a floor plan that was used to develop the proposed, or the sketch development plan, the proposed plat. That simply shows you the nature of the fourplexes that are planned. There are 2 on the upper level, 2 on the lower level, a garage provided for each unit. You can call them 1 bedroom with a den or 2 potential bedrooms. And if you'll maybe possibly flip back to Exhibit 5, you would see that the garage access is provided by driveways to the back. And this development, and we'll see that in a minute, is something that the Block family has been doing in the St. Martin's area. It's also something that's going on right now in the area of the new elementary school, Pioneer Trails, just off of Business 50 in the subdivision there. Exhibit 6 is the floor plan. Exhibit 7 is pictures of the properties they have developed at St. Martin's, and it is that floor plan and that layout. Exhibit 8 actually shows, it takes the GIS database, and actually we tried to take a look at properties that we believed were not owner occupied. So what you have in front of you in Exhibit 8 is actually the entire neighborhood. You can see the 10 acres plus or minus that Mr. Block would like to develop, and you get a sense of what is being used as rental property now. Exhibit 9 is actually just a very preliminary conceptual sketch plat. Basically what we did, and there are alternatives to developing this property, in as much as Mr. Block would like to retain ownership, he likes the plan that he's come up with. This is simply done to show that the total number of units, while with the RS4 zoning you can get more units than that, but it would be relatively simple to create a subdivision that would have the same number of units. From our perspective, there's less impact to the overall area as far as the development footprint, and we think this is a good opportunity, a good alternative. In addition, and I'll back up, maybe 10 years ago, the city, county, and state spent a considerable amount of time for a redevelopment plan of the MSP property. One of the flaws I personally saw in the plan, that we wanted to bring all these jobs into the core of the city, but there was no place to live. And other than removal of existing homes in the Central East End, there's really no place to build a larger type of development and provide for housing. Development to date has really consisted of, first, the DNR Green Building, second, the State Health Lab, and then most recently, the Federal Courthouse. According to state records, there are somewhere between 325 and 375 employees at the Green Building and at the Health Lab, and we truly believe that people are looking for a place to live closer to work. We think we've seen that, and as we do go through the agenda tonight, you'll see almost everything we're dealing with is infill type development. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Block, it looks to us the work that he's done to date has been quality, and we think this is a good opportunity, and it takes away a substandard existing street and provides good use of a property that would be an infill development. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is that a creek along the property line there? Is that why the property line's so off?
That is correct.
Okay. All right.
We actually, to begin the process, we actually undertook to provide a boundary survey to really finally determine, we know the city's maintained the alleyway or the driveway for as long as we have record for, but we had no actual boundary survey. There had been no need. And the roadway that you see there on that final diagram Eric has up right now really runs the ridge, and then there's fairly steep grades tying to streets in the Renz Addition area. I will mention the Renz Addition area has been a good neighborhood for a number of years. In the late 70s and the early 80s, with the use of community development block grant funds, almost all of those streets in the Renz Addition area were curb and guttered, and some stormwater was provided. So that really changed the character of the neighborhood. And in all honesty, at that time, I would guess that it was 95% owner occupied. But we really believe, as we look at the Central East End and the redevelopment of MSP, that people are looking for places to live. And again, I'm back to the number of units. I actually think if you develop it as strictly as an RS4 subdivision, I think the number of units would exceed what's being proposed by Mr. Block. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So technically, per unit could be 2 bedrooms.
I'd let Mr. Block answer that, because as I look at the floor plan, it basically calls out a master bedroom and a den, but I'm assuming that den could be used for a second bedroom,
Okay.
or however the property owner would propose to use it.
The only reason I asked that is because is there any sort of traffic impact?
I think the city staff report actually addresses that, and I don't think we have any big disagreements in that regard. I will say this: the traffic in the neighborhood has certainly changed as part of the city's capital improvements plan. Both ends of High Street have been improved, and then McCarty Street has been improved for the length of it through the Central East End, and currently is being improved on the east end of East McCarty Street. So when the state did build the green building, without question, that changed the traffic characteristics in the neighborhood. And if you remember, in the day that we called it Riverside Park, I think there was only actually one access to Riverside Park, and that was Riverside Drive. And I think in the late 70s, early 80s, the city, in conjunction with the Housing Authority, extended Grant Street to provide the primary access now. So the traffic patterns have changed, but we don't see anything near the impact that, say, the DNR Green Building has created.
One of the things I would assume city staff would address, and that have a question about, would be the effect of this being potentially spot zoning. Have you got any comments regarding that you want to make?
You know, I actually do, keeping in mind I'm not city staff, Mr. Nunn, so we may not agree on this. When you come to a parcel this size, I personally feel comfortable with a modified land use that is residential. In particular, I feel comfortable when it's when the number of units actually approaches, but is likely less than what could be done from a strictly residential perspective. So for a tract of this size, I don't feel it. I would define it as spot zoning. I'm comfortable with that.
Kind of along the same lines with the number of units, having driven by there and looked at the terrain, have you got any comments or thoughts on, and this goes along with one of the things the staff mentioned, is that you could have 12 units per acre. Physically, how do you think that works out on this site?
The proposed development has 2 single-family lots and 7 fourplexes. So we're dealing, help me with the math there, I think we're dealing with 30 units. And that's a valid question that staff has raised. It's the market for traditional apartments, to me, is not that strong, and honestly would not be desirable in this neighborhood. When you have an attached garage and the type of amenities that this is talking about, I think that lends itself to the development. So did I satisfactorily answer the question?
Partially, I guess maybe if I phrase it differently, would be assuming that Mr. Block wanted to develop this to the full extent under RA1, do you think he could get 12 units per acre out of this?
No, but I think you could increase the density substantially over what is planned. That's an honest answer.
This might piggyback off what Dave's getting at, but obviously you've given it some great consideration, and I agree with Dave, and the terrain and things like that. With that being said, was there ever any consideration given to like a PUD zoning? Because I think it's questionable what is spot zoning and how big does the tract need to be before we don't call it spot zoning. But on the flip side, when you're talking about the applicant has, obviously put in some time in trying to figure out how to put this together, was that ever given a consideration to do PUD where everybody up front knew exactly what was going on, and then we wouldn't be sitting out here saying, well, if we rezone it to RA1 or whatever, someone else could come back, if Mr. Block or whoever does not decide to do this, and they go on and say, well, let's sell it, let's go on and do the bigger project.
Mr. Jordan, I think that's a valid point. We actually did have some limited discussion about that. Mr. Block is focused on the nature of his development, but I would understand the city's concern in that regard. I personally, because of the nature of the low density and the lack of difficulty or the ease with preparing a PUD plan, I think that would be relatively simple, but I certainly don't want to speak for Mr. Block in that regard, because our experience, the difficulty with PUD when you get into commercial or industrial is being able to define the use for the entire property. I don't think there's a question that once he starts building these units that that's his intent to finish, because it would devalue what he's built if he went to a traditional apartment setting with 12-unit buildings and the potential, you know, the at-grade parking. I don't see that as being desirable in this area. So from my perspective, it's relatively simple for this size of development, but I would really want Mr. Block to answer that question.
Thank you.
It's a reasonable question, though, very reasonable.
Guess I have several questions for you, Mr. Bates. On your Exhibit 5, you show 7 multi-resident and 2 single. Are those fourplexes?
The 7 lots are the fourplexes, and if you'll look at the pictures of the resident or the fourplexes that he's built to date, they have driveway access from front and back.
2 up and 2 down.
2 up and 2 down. And one of the problems you get into with the traditional RA development or the larger apartment buildings is the fact that parking becomes a concern, and you have to provide 2 spaces per unit. In this instance, you'd have the garage space as number 1, you'd have an adequate driveway to stack in for number 2, and then you would have additional driveway, we believe, that would take overflow parking.
And tonight, that's your comprehensive plan that you're offering?
Yes, sir.
Exhibit 5. Now, when I turn back here to Exhibit 9, are we looking at a future PUD, or is this pie in the sky, or why do we have 9 here? You're not really locked in on 7, but that's your plan tonight, is that correct?
Honestly, we are locked in on that. Mr. Block, in as much as he bought this as an investment property, said, okay, tell me how you would lay this out on a very preliminary basis, because we didn't try to maximize the number of lots in the existing RS4. We took a very preliminary look at the adjoining streets, I think McKinley, Buchanan, to see what could provide connectivity, and based on that, we said, okay, 2 points of access. And that this is not meant to be really other than for the commission to realize that, okay, if something is not available, he would have to look at an alternative with the existing zoning, and that's what we would do. But and that would come back through the platting and planning process. I will mention, and Mr. Block can correct my testimony if I'm wrong, one of the things that he looked at, if you'll look at the Exhibit 2, you see the 2 single-family residences or 2 single-family lots, and that leaves the McKinley Street right-of-way. I believe it was Mr. Block's intention to suggest the vacating of that if his development plan moves forward, because there would be no intent to use that. I thought he even went so far as to say that he would relinquish his right to it. As I understand the city's vacating process, it splits the property down the middle and it goes to both sides. And in this instance, his development plan would not include the use of that.
Mr. Block is going to maintain ownership of these 9 lots and build rental property on them.
It was my understanding that he certainly intends to maintain ownership of the 7 fourplex lots. He may sell the single-family lots. Now, Mr. Chairman, we'd probably be smart to get Mr. Block up here so I don't misstate when you're done with me.
Okay, so you're done with me then. You want me to talk to Mr. Block?
No, I'm sir, that would be if you're done with me, I'll let Mr. Block comment.
All right, bring Mr. Block back up here.
Yes, Mr.
I
Robinette.
guess I'm going to ask you the same question. You're going to maintain ownership of these 7 lots where you have the multiple units on, is that correct?
Yeah, it's my intention to own and manage the whole complex. as we have out in St. Martin's.
Okay, so as long as you own all these 7 lots, then we could come back with a modified 9 later, that you had an exhibit here of 9, because you still own all these back lots. And if you can get excess from one of these back streets, you can still further develop that. Is that not correct?
That's certainly no intention of mine.
But it's possible.
Well, I would be requesting,
You'd have to come back with a PUD, but that's
Yeah.
possible, right?
yeah, it's possible. Yeah,
That answered my question.
yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else have any question, Mr. Block, when he's back up here? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this request? Anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this request? Please come forward to the mic, identify yourself, name and address.
My name is Kim Haller. I live at 107 South Taylor Street. I didn't prepare anything. I would like to compliment Mr. Block. I think he has a great proposal based on what he says he intends to do. As a resident of South Taylor Street, our property backs up to what was formerly Mr. Backley's 10 acres plus or minus, as several of my neighbors are here. I think Mr. Block did come and meet with some of our neighbors the other evening and answered a lot of our questions. When I got home, I felt better about the types of buildings he was proposing to build, but when I got home and discussed it with my husband, our major concern, number one, is about traffic. At the top of the hill where they were showing the pictures of Karen Street, it basically makes a 90-degree angle at the top of South Taylor and becomes the quote-unquote driveway or alleyway that goes back to the Bosch property at the top of the hill. And then there's 3 other single-family homes back there right now that use that alley or driveway. On that intersection there where Karen meets South Taylor, there is a yield sign for traffic coming out of the east property from Mr. Backley's old home and the other 3 homes there. Then when we come up the hill from South Taylor, we don't have to stop. We have the right-of-way. There's a yield sign there. And there's no stopping to turn from Karen to come down the hill. On the opposite end of Taylor Street, which is going up a hill as well, there's a stop sign at Huff, that's H-O-U-G-H, Street. So it became a concern of ours thinking about how traffic would increase when you think about 7 fourplexes at 2 vehicles per unit perhaps. I was calculating 60 to 65 or 66 vehicles that would be going in and out from Riverside Drive back into this property, if it's the cul-de-sac. And if there's a stop sign placed at the top of South Taylor, it'd be difficult for us in the wintertime, traveling uphill both ways, basically, for us to get in and out of our subdivision, for lack of better words, or off of our street. And it becomes a concern as well because the few residents, and I won't say it's the people that live there now, but there have been instances in the past where the flow of traffic hasn't been the greatest because of people not abiding by the yield sign. We all try to drive defensively. That's one concern. The second concern is because we are all single-family homes, and until, I guess, right across the street from my neighbor below me is now rental property, but from the whole block of South Taylor is owned. It's owned property. So our property that backs up to Mr. Block's property is all owner. We're all living in our owned homes, I'll put it that way. So the concern also becomes for me if it becomes a multifamily zoned and somebody, although a very nice building, puts a 4-plex or a 12-plex in my backyard, basically, my property value is probably going to go down. If it's developed, if it remains and is developed as single-family housing, I believe that for myself and for my neighbors, our property values will remain as close to what they are now and perhaps increase. I think they have less of a chance of decreasing if it's a multifamily development. So my hope is that the zoning wouldn't be changed to allow multifamily dwellings. Thank you very much.
Any questions, Ms.
Oh,
Haller?
I'm sorry.
Ms. Haller?
Yes. And Karen. And Karen Drive. Well, I'm concerned about a stop sign being placed for Taylor Street to stop at the top of that hill so that the flow of traffic would go straight through on Karen. I go both ways. There is now. I actually, because I work just up on High Street, I have a real short distance, but now when I stop at the top of where Riverside curves around by Surplus Properties building and go travel on down the hill, I think it's called Riviera Street, and come up to Capitol Avenue. And the traffic has increased a lot. Thank you for mentioning that, because when we discussed it yesterday evening, my comment was, I guess the city's going to have to think about making it parking on one side of Riverside only from High Street to Karen, because right now the people who are living, there are some duplexes up there on Riverside Drive out to High Street, and right now the residents that live there have larger trucks and stuff that they're parking there, and it has become a problem with getting in and out from Karen to Riverside there, both ways. It's kind of a tight area with parking on both sides. Karen Drive right now is only parking on one side. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else here who would like to speak in opposition to this proposal? Anyone else like to speak?
I live, my name's Ray Henches. I live right below Kim, who just, when you get as old as I am, we forget sometimes. But was it my understanding that the lots that are multifamily are in that cul-de-sac area? And there was a whole bunch on that thing that runs down the old abandoned street. Those would be single family? Could anybody, right. Yeah, go number 9, I think it was. That's still not what I'm thinking. It was the plat. There you go, that one. Those lots that run down to the, you know, if you reactivated that street, which is now abandoned, that runs down, what is that, McKinley? McKinley. And those lots, those 7 lots that are just east of McKinley, are those multifamily too? Well, actually, is it even, it's not even platted. Is it platted as multifamily?
If I may, I think I can answer your questions.
Okay. Yeah.
First, if I could get you to give us your address for the record.
105 South Taylor.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
This proposal that's on the screen right now is an item that is presented by the applicant's consultant, literally as a theoretical way to divide the property under the current single-family zoning.
Okay.
So what I think that they were trying to show is that they could fit roughly 26 single-family lots onto that property,
right,
in that manner, under the existing zoning. Just as an example, this is not what they're proposing. They have not submitted this as an actual proposal.
Okay.
I think is just an example on how someone could potentially develop
but
the
point
property.
is, my question is, could those lots, those 7 lots going down there east of the abandoned McKinley street there, would those be zoned multifamilies?
Okay. Again, this is just an idea. I mean, just something that they put down on paper to show. But to I think answer your question is if the property were rezoned as they were as they're requesting to a straight multifamily residential zoning district, they would be free to develop it in any manner that they like, as long as they stay within what's allowed for that zoning. Now, I think that portion of that you're referring to, those first 7 lots, is probably on the single family side of the line. Certainly the rest of it, you know, if rezoned just to a straight multifamily residential zoning district, could still be developed in that manner. But that's a lot of hypothetical, and is really not what they're presenting tonight.
Now, the land that Shannon bought, does that include those 7 lots?
Again, I prefer. I mean, this particular visual is very difficult to answer questions on because it was merely submitted as a way that could potentially be divided as single family. So it's not. This is not a multifamily proposal. So that's shown on the screen. In fact,
Okay.
it probably shouldn't be there.
Okay.
Any questions, Mr. Hinges?
Anybody got your
Well,
question?
and maybe to further, if I'm correct here, and of course, as Eric has said, this is just an example that's up here, but I don't know that if they wanted to develop it as multiple family, which isn't in their proposal, those 7 lots would still be outside the multiple family request. They'd still be single family.
I think that was my question.
Yeah.
In other words, they're not requesting those 7 lots be part of the multifamily,
That area of the parcel is still single family in their
Okay.
request,
even though he owns it.
even though he owns it, yes.
Okay. So we're on this side of those 7 lots?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this? Let me have other people, and then I'll bring you back up, Ms. Howler. Is that fair enough?
Yes, sir, thank you.
My name is Eugene Cutting. I live at 329 Hutton, but I own the property at 102 South Lincoln. And my biggest concern is the runoff from the water if it's all developed. Is there any provisions in there for stormwater? Because, I mean, it's quite a hill. Once it's developed, there's going to be a lot of concrete.
Engineering, or Mr. Bates want to answer that? Engineering?
Yeah, I can do that. Obviously, he hadn't submitted his infrastructure plan, but we've had some preliminary meetings with them, and we would be looking at some kind of a berm or detention structure being required on this property if it were developed like this, to route the water basically to the creek, to keep it off of the downstream properties.
Okay, because the
Now,
creek
that we
does
haven't-
run
Haven't seen
between
anything, but that would be our intent to require that.
this property and South Lincoln. You're talking about that little jagged creek.
Yeah, I mean, just
I mean,
preliminarily,
it's
we
gonna
looked
need
at,
work. It's gonna need development big time if you run all that water down that. Because me and another guy here know the water comes down that hill pretty fast, and I already got water problems. So that's one of the things that I'm very concerned about. And I mentioned that I live on Hutton Lane, and I live around a lot of duplexes. And is there going to be some kind of privacy fence or something built around the duplexes to separate the single-family properties, or?
Again, there hasn't been a specific. I mean, if rezoned, the applicant would need to submit a complete site plan for what he's proposing for the development. But no, there would not be a requirement for a fence in any manner.
Okay. But would the creek be developed by the city with a concrete surface instead of just the old water ditch? Because, I mean, it's going to overflow. I've seen what the city does. I've seen what happens when water, because I got a property at 100 North Lincoln, and the city won't maintain the creek, and it just keeps washing away.
Yeah, the creek would not become the responsibility of the city. That's per the code. That the creek, I'll just point at this one since I can't get the mouse to work if it's behind some of you, but this is the creek area. But we would, you know, had preliminary discussions. There would need to be like a berm in this area, probably some detention structure that would let it into the creek directly, so it wouldn't come down on these properties. We're well aware of the complaint history there. That being said, you know, the water would still flow through the creek and under the street here over towards Grant Street. So.
But it would just be
Open
free
drainage.
floating?
Yeah. Yes,
Free
sir. A
floating,
creek of
not-
that size, you can't pave. You couldn't get a permit to really pave a creek anymore.
Okay, so that would be sufficient from an engineering point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it would be sufficient. I mean, creeks are going to be creeks and move around, but it is
Okay.
a large.
But I mean,
it is
this
a large
creek is on a hill sloping down instead of
Yeah.
running through a valley.
right here.
Right. Okay, so that said, that there wouldn't be overflow from the creek during heavy rains that would flood these properties that sit on the backside of that?
We would require that this be detained, that it gets no worse. Now, some of those properties may not have been built properly originally, as far as a floodplain requirement when they were built. That wouldn't be the responsibility of the new property owner to take care of that problem, but we have a group that does work with property owners to rectify those situations.
Okay. And the other thing I noticed, most of his properties are just siding or whatever, and most of the other properties in the area are all brick houses or 80% brick or whatever. So that's kind of decreasing the value of the properties of the established homeowners there. So I was just kind of wondering if that's all the better condos, you know, or whatever he's planning on building, you know, or if there's any adjustment on that. Because that most of these people are homeowners, and I understand that, and I deal with them. I got rental property, and I understand. I try to keep my places looking as good as I can. So that's all the comments I have. Thank you.
Have any questions? Mr. Cuddy?
I might just point out something in general, not necessarily for
Okay,
Eugene, but
thank you.
based on some of the questions we've had, what we're gonna deal with is rezoning, and we don't have any specific development plans, so some of the things like the runoff and those type of things would be addressed in any plat that would be presented later on, depending on what happens with rezoning.
Anyone else here who would like to speak in opposition?
My name is Charlotte Ellsbury at 109 South Taylor Street. And I have a question about the pond that's behind our house that Buell put in many, many years. This is my mother. Many, many years ago. And I was just wondering if the pond is going to be filled or not. And also the odor from the dead fish that is in there, I know is not healthy for us in our neighborhood.
That doesn't show up in our development plan, what is going to happen with the pond.
Well, you
ma'am.
come out and look at it. You'll find
Yeah,
out.
the pond needs to be taken care of one way or the other.
Okay, you need to give us your address, ma'am.
109 South Taylor
Taylor.
Street.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was on Buell's property. He had the pond dug and everything. And the city has said there's nothing they can do about it. But I was just wondering if Shannon Block's gonna fill it
Well,
in
nice
now
ladies, I
with his.
can't answer that, but Mr. Block, would you come forward and tell them what you're gonna do with that pond?
Yeah, thank you. Be happy to answer that question. There's been several people ask about the pond, some for, it seems like most are against. I have no opinion one way or the other than I think that it could possibly serve as a water retention basin in the future. Whether it be drained and left empty for storm water, I would certainly be open to any ideas on that. It's not my opinion one way or the other to keep it or to drain it.
So that's something you're open to and be willing to work with the engineers on that
Sure.
pond?
Actually, it was mentioned, Matt was at a meeting a few months ago about possibly keeping it for that reason.
Does that answer your question, ladies? I mean, it's still something in transition here.
Drain, you know, to get rid of the dead fish, and the smell today when I was mowing grass was terrible. So we
Okay.
just need to get rid of it. Because we tried it when Buell was still living, but it didn't work.
Okay, if this passes, and this is something that Mr. Block and the city and the neighbors can work out, is that fair enough? All right, thank you.
Could I answer one
Sure.
question that Ray had about the proposed plat that we are talking about tonight on Exhibit 5? I just wanted to make sure that Ray understood that the house that sits at the corner of South Taylor and Karen Street, that would remain single family. Also, the first 2 lots there past the McKinley easement, those I'm proposing as single family to fit the surrounding area best. I really am trying to keep everyone's best interest in mind. And it is important to me that we keep the private setting that it is. Those that would rather not see the side of a fourplex that have single-family lots and homes at this time would actually have to look through the yards of 2 other single-family homes in order to see that. So this proposal, I believe, is a very light footprint on what could be done there. So if anyone has any questions, other questions.
We'll get back to you if we have any more questions.
Okay, thank you.
If we have anybody else here that's in opposition to this proposal would like to speak?
Hi, my name is Sonia Spruill, and I live at 1411 Wilcoxon. And for the most part, most of my people have asked what I wanted to ask, but my concern is the greenery with the nature back there. I don't know what's their plan on that. If you look on the screen with number 2, you'll see the trees behind our home. So I don't know, in that plan, do they plan to keep that up? That way we don't have to, you know, with the traffic or whatever, with the, it's the one that has the number 2 on it. You can see our yard a little better that way. Yeah. So we're right down at the bottom where you see the greenery. I don't know if that plan is to stay so that the privacy still stays, because those multiplex will be in our backyard. Yeah, you can see it there. So that's basic concern with me with having small children and the additional traffic or whatnot. And I know you said the city don't have to force fence, but I'm not sure if Mr. Block, you know, plan to leave the greenery there.
Are most of those trees down along the existing creek, ma'am?
I know, if you look toward the end here, those are actually like in our backyard, actually. And then you have the property, we have a two fence and then another one. And then the property actually sit where the drawing starts at. Basically. Yeah, to kind of, to leave it, yes. Because we also have a lot of wildlife, so I don't know I'm sure there'll be things set in place for that, because we actually have deer and possum and a lot of other things back there. Mm-hmm. Yes. They get in my yard, so I know.
Okay, to go with your pond back there and your fish, right?
No, the pond doesn't bother me, but we have had the runoff, and it brings dirt to Wilcoxon. But
that's something we can work out with the developer, but I don't think he's addressed that tonight, that he's going to change that any at all at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of this witness?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question for the folks this evening. I do have a question for staff that seems to keep reoccurring with these neighbors. Is there, if this zoning request was to move forward, does the current code require the owner to have any type of buffer between the new zoning, the RA, and the existing zoning? Would they have to have, let's go back to the fence, or let's go back to trees, or whatever? Does the two districts require a buffer? And I know we've talked about that up here many a times. Does that require a buffer yard?
Yes, it does. There are buffer yard requirements built into the zoning code. However, the developer would have the option of several different buffer yard types. Anything from an open space buffer yard up to a natural area buffer yard to a fence with a row of trees, depending on how much area that they have available. Now, under the development plan that they submitted that's up on the screen, essentially they would be able to meet their buffer yard requirement either by leaving the trees or leaving an open space there.
Well, here's my thing, and this goes back to a lot of questions that we've had tonight. This development plan is a plan. We're rezoning it to a specific district. That's it. If we rezone this to RA whatever, Mr. Block can do this plan, or he can change his mind. And I don't want the constituents leaving here tonight thinking that that's the plan. That's one of the reasons I brought up the PUD zoning, is that then it's kind of set in stone, if you want to say. So if we rezone it to RA, yes, they have to have a buffer zone, but that would all be done during the development process and so on and so forth, correct?
That's correct. I mean, what's being requested is just a rezoning.
Correct.
They submitted this as supplementary information, and again, it's very difficult to talk about and present because they would have absolutely no requirement to develop it in this manner.
And that's what I'm trying to bring out, that we're rezoning an area of ground, and that's it. We're not approving a development plan. We're not approving the type of siding he has to put on any structures. And we can't approve whether they have to be owner-occupied, rentals, or whatever. That's the things that, I think we need to make very clear, because I think we keep dancing around it. So that's what I wanted to bring out. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, question? I noticed sometimes, in regard to this lady's question, it seems to me sometimes that buffer zone isn't enforced. Because I know a couple of instances we had those, and they were supposed to have a certain area for that buffer zone, and I can mention one to you right now that happened several years ago, and it never got there. I mean, it got cleared out and it never got put back. Do you guys, does the engineering department, do they watch those buffer zones and make sure they're there, or what if they go in and doze them out, and then what happens?
Right. We certainly do our best to keep track of them, and when they're absent, notify the property owner that they need to be reestablished. Oftentimes, trees do die, and occasionally, we have to go out and re-inspect them in order to find them. I'd be happy to talk to you after the meeting about the specific example that you have.
Well, do we have another go at this? Is this a preliminary thing, or do we have another go at it? If there's going to be a set of plans where we can look and see what they're doing in regard to his question, or how's this going to work?
Okay, this development plan that's on the screen right now, I actually this is not what you would be approving. It's only submitted for supplementary information.
Okay.
What you would be approving is a rezoning of the property that's shown up on the screen right now from single family to multifamily. And then if that is approved by, through this body and by the city council, then they would be free to develop it in any manner that the multifamily residential zoning district allows. Now, they already have a plan that's kind of in development, but they certainly wouldn't be tied to it. That's what you're approving, is the rezoning, not the plan. If they were to resubmit this as a PUD plan or something along those lines, then we could start talking specifics about buffer yards, type of building materials, and other things. But that is not what they applied for. They applied for a rezoning of the property in order to pursue the development.
Thank you.
Have anyone else here to speak in opposition to this proposal?
Yes, I'm Mark Holterman. I live at 100 South Lincoln, due east of the property. And we're here tonight just for the rezoning, correct? And if we rezone it to what they want, what does that exactly mean?
The proposal tonight is that we're going to rezone it from RS4 medium density residence to RA1 high density.
Okay.
Which means it can go up to, in the RA1, I think they said you can have, what, 12 units per acre?
That's correct.
And this is just a rezoning tonight.
Right.
We don't
I
have
know.
a PUD, we don't have a comprehensive plan. We're just saying we're gonna go from medium density residential to high density
Well,
for this property.
I just want to say I'm totally against this. This is a residential neighborhood, and I am totally against this. And I understand there's a lot of other stuff I could say, but they don't train tonight. But I am totally against the rezoning, because it's a nice neighborhood, and I don't want to look up my hill all them dang apartments. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions, Mr. Holder? Thank you. Anyone else here to speak in opposition?
My name is Robert Malone. I live at 104 McKinley Street. Basically, what I want to say is, with the zoning the way it is now, I don't think this, I mean, what he's asking for, I don't think we should give him, or you guys should give him carte blanche, because I really don't want it 93 units, right out my back door or right next to my house. I bought my property 25 years ago, actually paid it off this year. I've enjoyed living where I live. I live at a dead-end street. I bought it and raised kids there. I've got grandchildren coming over. I don't have people driving through. I've got great neighbors. I just, right now, until he comes up with whatever plan you were calling it, where we exactly know what he's going to do to the area, I hope you guys vote his proposal down. And that's basically everything I want to say right now.
Anyone have any questions, Mr. Malone? Thank you.
Okay.
Chris Vanderveen, 1403 Wilcoxon. I agree with everything the gentleman just said. I just purchased my home a couple years ago, bought it in a foreclosure, as Mr. Black purchased that home up the hill in foreclosure, and got a very good deal on it. And it is zoned single family and has been a long time. I have many neighbors that are against this. They're out of town or retired, cannot be present tonight, and I'm speaking on their behalf also, that our property values are going to drop. Mr. Black's representative brought up the point of rental properties. Even the rental properties in the area are single family homes. They are our neighbors. They are not multi-family. They can do up to 16 units on a lot. There is no set plan. It's going to drop the values of our homes. And I'm totally against the rezoning. If Mr. Black does not want to change the area, he can build single family residence. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Have any questions of this witness? Okay. Thank you. Anyone else here who would like to speak in opposition to this? Ms. Howler, I think you had something else to say?
I appreciate that. I believe Mr. Jordan addressed the question that I wanted to ask earlier about, because I don't understand all of the issues here. But Mr. Block graciously shared his drawings with us and what he proposes to do for the development. But if we change the zoning tonight, or whenever you would vote on it, to become RA for the apartments, rather than the single family that it is now, after that change is made, if it is, he doesn't have to do what he's proposing. He's able to develop it in any way, shape, or form within the guidelines of the RA zoning. I understand that. But my question is about the PUD. That's a planned unit development, is that correct? And if that is done in that manner, then the proposed drawing that Mr. Block shared with us with the 7 multi-units and then the 2 single-family dwellings, if it's within a PUD, what he proposes there would have to be what is constructed. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct, ma'am. If he comes back with a PUD, then we'll have to have another public hearing. So you would have an opportunity to come back and ask questions about the planned unit development.
Right. I appreciate that. I guess my question or my statement would be then that would protect my issues as a property owner there, not wanting McKinley Street to go and be developed or anything behind my property back where the pond is, and it would also keep Mr. Block's intentions that he's shown us to be that is what he would actually be constructing. So
Yes. And tonight we're simply looking at rezoning.
zoning.
We're not looking at a PUD. We're not quite that far along.
so the PUD isn't a part of a zoning issue. It's something different.
It's rezoning now. If you come back with a planned unit development, then it has to be developed that way.
Okay.
And that's what normally happens in some type of large subdivisions or any type subdivisions. They usually come back with a PUD, and then they work with the city to make sure that they meet all the codes.
Okay. But my concern again though, and I am against it becoming RA because of the fact that once the rezoning is approved, if Mr. Block decides to sell the property or in the future, anyone can develop it in any manner with up to 12 units per acre. So again, my wish would be for it to remain a single family. And thank you very much.
Any other opponents that wish to speak in opposition to this proposal? If not, we will close the public testimony. Staff report.
Mr. Chairman?
Do you want to respond to something, Mr. Bates?
Yes, in visiting with Mr. Block, Mike Bates, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. In visiting with Mr. Block and subsequently with the city councilor, I asked if it would be we would have the potential to ask for a continuance. The plan was actually designed to minimize the footprint and to try to maintain those buffers around the site. While that is truly Mr. Block's intent, that doesn't mean that will happen if something happens to Mr. Block, and we know that it's a slippery slope. So our request for consideration would be, would the commission entertain continuing this, allowing us to prepare the PUD plan that we think would satisfy many of the concerns of the neighborhood.
Counselor, are you on board with that?
Yep, the commission would just table it if that's what you choose to do till next month.
Okay, you want to go to next month? Did that give you enough?
Yes, and we'll try, and we will meet with city staff. The concerns about stormwater, Mr. Block mentioned the dry detention basin. It truly is his intent not to change this footprint any more than he has to minimize the street construction. So I think that gives us enough time. I didn't know if we had the option of asking for 2 months. It's a lengthy process, but we'd like to get it right when we come back. So whether that's a month or 2, we're at the direction of the commission.
Why don't we start by giving you a continuance for 1 month, if that's okay with the commissioners, and if that isn't enough, then you can get with city staff, and I'm sure we can work out an additional continuance for you.
And it's very possible we'll come back next month and sort out many of these details and have additional concerns that we need to address.
Mr. Bates, if I could make a suggestion, if you all, at all possible, when you get your plan at least partially formalized, to meet with the residents and to show them what it's going to look like, what a PUD, what it really means, because they have a lot of control then with that type of development. Because this is a big change. I mean, it's a huge change. Right in the middle of a neighborhood, these areas we've been trying to develop for single family, the old time development. So if you can get the neighborhood to be on board and something that fits in what the city vision for the future is, I think we can work with it. But as it stands now, I think there's a lot of concerns.
We appreciate your suggestion, and we will try to respond accordingly and work with the neighborhood.
I was going to add two things real quick. One is we need to make sure that staff, I think they're scrambling over here to make sure that they're okay with the continuance and the time frame. And then let the people that were here tonight know that if the owner comes back next month with a PUD plan, that it is still a rezoning. We're going to be rezoning from single family to PUD. That is a zoning district. So you're going to get re-notified, and staff can tell me if I'm wrong, but you would get re-notified that it is a rezoning, but the rezoning would be to PUD, and underneath that PUD would be some zoning districts that would allow for the uses that possibly we've been shown here tonight. So rest assured that you guys will be re-notified about the process and have an opportunity to come up here again and meet in a public forum to go over this.
Okay, upon a request from the proponent here, the chair would entertain a motion that we continue this case until the October meeting.
So moved.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We will continue it until the October meeting. You all will be re-notified if we have the public hearing at that time. If it looks like you can't make it, then if you can give us enough notice so we can notify these residents, Mr. Bates.
Mr. Chairman, I do have several copies of the exhibits we provided tonight. I know the city has them electronically, but to save the neighborhood the problem, I'll be happy to supply those upon the closure of this issue. Thank you. I'll pass those to the neighborhood.
Okay.
And just for informational purposes, Mr. Chairman, and of course we sometimes get caught into timeline difficulties when scheduling meetings and public hearings, as there is certain laws that have to be followed in this regard that are set out by state statute. But the October meeting is scheduled for October 11th. And we normally try to mail letters to surrounding property owners about 2 weeks in advance of the meeting, which would give us about 2 weeks to discuss with the consultant any particular changes to their development proposal or what they're applying for. So if we can get those items arranged within 2 weeks, then we can notify the property owners of what they are applying for. Okay. And if not, then we would be caught into a situation where we'd have to table it again.
Okay, Mr. Block, Mr. Bates, 2-week time frame to get back with the city. Is that enough time, or do you need more?
While they're consulting, you can certainly set it over 2 months. I mean, make that way everybody will know they don't need to show up.
I really think we would be smart if you would indulge us to go the 2 months, because I think the better the detail we provide, the better the chance for resolution.
Okay, if the original person had made the motion and the second will withdraw it, then we will have a new motion.
Or I can just amend it.
All right, just amend your motion then to November.
I would be glad to do that.
Okay, we're not going to continue this if vote favorably till the November Planning and Zoning meeting. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, nay. It will be continued until November, and you all will be notified again. Thank you for coming tonight.
And that meeting is scheduled for November 8th. And again, if you received a letter in the mail, you would still be on the mailing list, and you would receive a letter notifying you of the meeting, for the November meeting, about 2 weeks before the meeting. And certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to give city staff a call.
Next case, P12014305 and 307 Floral Drive, rezoning from C2 and PUD to CO. Who is here to represent that case?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, briefly describe the proposal.
Okay, Eric, if you'll wait, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be back in 5.
Certainly.
Go yet. Eric, if you would want to give your staff report on this, please.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, this is case number P12014, located at 305 and 307 Flora Drive. The request is a rezoning from C2, general commercial, and PUD, planned unit development, to a CO, or office commercial zoning district. Okay. Up on the screen is the location map of the property. Just to orient you to where we are here, Tanner Bridge Road, it goes right through there, and we're located about 300 feet west of Tanner Bridge Road. Then over on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see Christie Drive and Highway 54, major arterial through the town. This particular piece of property, it's actually 2 parcels, but it's probably easier just to think of it as a single piece of property. The 2 parcels, the boundary between the 2 is actually right along the zoning line. And so there's actually 1 parcel that's zoned C2 and 1 parcel that's zoned PUD. But in the real estate community, it seems to have always been marketed as a single piece of property, despite the fact that there's this old property line going through it. And as I mentioned, it's got a C2 and a PUD zoning on it. There is some zoning history behind this property. It's actually failed at a rezoning or development proposal twice, as outlined in the staff report. Back in November of 1994, there was a request to rezone the PUD portion of the property to C2 for the purpose of constructing a mini storage unit warehouse, and that was ultimately withdrawn by the applicant. And then also in August of 2010, just a couple years ago, there was a request to rezone the property to RA1, a multifamily residential zoning district, for the purpose of constructing apartments. That request did go all the way to the city council and failed on a vote of 4-6. Okay, the purpose of the request, while there's been no development proposal or anything outlining how the property would be developed, but the applicant put on the application that the types of land uses that the applicant envisions developing the property with would be along the lines of daycares, offices, and assisted living facilities. And the CO zoning district would accommodate those types of uses. But there's no specific plan. That's just what the applicant had in mind, and is requesting to rezone the property to CO in order to accommodate that. Now the applicant is Susan Moore, and the property owners are Gary and Mary Phillips. And so the applicant is different from the property owners. The applicant would presumably purchase the property if after the rezoning. And there's, I do have an aerial photo of the property. It's undeveloped, but it does border a number of single-family homes along Tanner Bridge Road. And then I also have an excerpt of the comprehensive plan, development plan map with the property highlighted. And of course, the development plan map of the comprehensive plan is the map that that is looked at in terms of as guiding the zoning of the property. And this property is identified as being intended for commercial use within the city's comprehensive plan on this map. And therefore, the request would be in line with the what the comprehensive plan has identified for the property. I'd be happy to answer any initial questions.
Any questions of staff at this time? Okay, who is here to present this proposal? Mr. Bates?
Mr. Chairman, Mike Bates, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. I think Eric's given you a really good background of the property and the stages we've gone through to try to attempt a development. As he said, in August of 2010, It was the last time it was before the commission, and we thought we had a good plan based on the lack of density, but when we got to the council, that did not alleviate the concerns of the neighborhood about apartments. And what we did come away with from that meeting was a sense that CO, the neighborhood commercial office use, the uses that Susan, who is here tonight, identified, would be more acceptable to the neighborhood. The potential buyer under contract at that time did not have a development plan that was compatible with what we thought would be acceptable. So subsequently, 2 years later, we're back thinking that this is a good transition. As you look at the zoning map, and I provided a couple of supplemental handouts, you can see that we are up against the skating rink and we are up against C2. On the other side, we've got state office buildings and a PUD that's owned, and we have no plans for development at this time. So with that, I'll be very brief. We think this is a good compromise. The person under contract to buy it, Susan Moore, thinks that this is a good opportunity, and that there, like it or not, there is a stigma about multifamily development, in particular without adequate controls in our community. So we present this to you tonight. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Bates? Thank you. Anyone else here that would like to speak in favor of this proposal?
I'm Susan Moore. I live at 5201 Sharon Drive. I'm the one that has it under contract. And I did go talk to all the neighbors on Tanner Bridge, almost all of them, everyone that I could get a hold of. They were all very happy with the plan. I didn't have anybody that seemed unhappy. The thing they were most concerned about is multifamily. They don't want multifamily in their backyard, and I don't blame them. They're mostly older people. They've been there for many years, and that's their home. So that was their concern. That's what I got out of it. They were very receptive to what I have in mind, and very nice, easy to work with. They definitely would fight anybody trying to do multifamily, and we are not planning on doing that. So I think this would be the best use for that property. Thank you.
Any questions of Ms. Moore? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here that would like to speak in favor of this proposal? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this proposal? Seeing none, we'll close the public testimony. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As outlined in the staff report that's contained in your packets, staff does support the requested rezoning. The land use pattern in this area is commercial in nature, and the development plan map of the comprehensive plan identifies the property as being intended for commercial use. And certainly the establishment of a lower level of commercial zoning adjacent to the existing single-family area would help to create a transitional zoning between the more intense commercial uses to the west of the property and the single-family uses to the east of the property. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Any questions of staff at this time? Chair would therefore entertain a motion to approve the rezoning of the property from C2 to and PUD to CO.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion to rezone the property as submitted this evening.
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion unanimously passes. Case P12015, zoning text amendment. Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to handle this one. This is a interesting opportunity for us as staff to get some of your input. The basis of it is that we're looking to change our noise ordinance, and there happens to be some noise regulations within the zoning code. So although we don't utilize that, there's actually a nuisance code definition of noise and that issue in a different part of the code that we usually turn to. But we need to revamp that one, and in the meantime we might as well take out this part of the zoning code that no one knew existed, or I didn't know anyway. We at least didn't utilize it. If you read it, I can't even understand it, so I'm sure it's for smarter people than me. But we're going to replace that with what you have in front of you. And so I'm certainly would be interested to hear what you have to say on it. I'll tell you, it kind of started out more as an issue about construction noise, but it's bled into some issues with that there's at least a couple people here about, so they may want to speak on it. What we would say, our problem, I guess, in most of our noise regulations in the nuisance part of it is there's not a specific decibel amount to measure. And really, even if you look in the zoning code part, it's some kind of a combination of center frequency cycles and maximum permitted pressure levels of decibels. We're going to replace that with just a decibel amount. We have a decibel meter, and we would end up buying some more if we did it. And the nuisance part of it, which you don't have in front of you, mostly talks about noise in general terms and people yelling and hawking, and really it's got some really outdated stuff. So what we would do is keep the declaration that noise is a nuisance, and that gives us some opportunities to quash the nuisance when it comes up. Specifically, one of the issues that always comes up is where do you measure the noise from? So if you're looking in your packet, it's 21-115. B is the point of measurement. So what we would be directing our officers to do is to measure the sound from 5 feet from the boundary line where the noise is emanating from, and or from the point where a citizen is complaining, if it's louder in that part. The reason is essentially you can have as much noise as you want, really, if it stays on your property. It's when it leaves your property that becomes an issue. And you can't measure closer than 5 feet from a wall because that bounces off and that kind of thing. So while we kind of assume that it would be loudest 5 feet from the property, it's possible that because of the way buildings are located, the sound bounces off those walls and it's actually louder down the street. We still want it to be limited as it leaves the property, so that's kind of why we came up with the location. And I'll say, for the most part, we just ripped this ordinance off of some town. I can't remember now. We looked at a bunch of them and liked most of this. Now we've certainly changed some of it. The maximum permitted sound levels changes from daytime to nighttime. We've got daytime from 7 to 10 and nighttime from 10 to 7, basically. Commercial would be 81 decibels, industrial 70, and residential 60. If you flip to the last page of that, there's some noise levels, and those are taken from our sound meter by Roger Schwartz, who's the Director of Public Works. So he actually went out there and measured all this stuff, and it gives you some pretty good ideas of where those noise levels are. And at the bottom, he's got the OSHA maximum level noise exposure, so that's for work levels. And there's a gentleman here I believe is going to want to talk to you, and he's got some other numbers that I can hand out to you if that's what he desires. It's actually, as I look at it, not all that far off, but he may disagree with that, but he can let you know that. Under B, 21-116B is another issue that's kind of come up. It's adjustments. So what it says is you've got those maximum levels, but if you don't exceed it by 5 dBA, you can do that for 30 minutes, or you can exceed it by 10 dBA for 15 minutes. And I've heard some concerns about that, and I'm okay with maybe taking that out and lowering that to 5 minutes or something like that. And the reason is you might just have a spike in noise for some reason, accidentally or otherwise, or maybe just a short duration. And so there ought to be, I believe there ought to be a little leeway there. I did actually, from the prosecutor talking to me about it, so I'm kind of on agreement with taking some of that out. I really don't want my cop sitting around there for 30 minutes with a wand. So if we lower that to, if you all are interested in lowering that to 5 minutes, I'd certainly like to take that recommendation to the City Council. Then we've got some exemptions. So under, that's 21-116C. Really, the important stuff is in 21-116, I think. But under C, there's some exemptions from the sound code. Noises that aren't directly under your control. Noises emanating from construction or maintenance between 7, and we've got 9 there, and I just had a little discussion about whether that should be 10, but I'd actually probably peel that one back to 7 or something like that, because you're talking about pneumatic hammers and that kind of stuff. When you're building things, it's going to be loud, so I don't think we want to limit builders' ability to build. Safety signals and such is 3. Transient noises from moving sources such as cars and trucks and airplanes and railroads You know, if your car is driving by and it's louder than is loud in a commercial zone, I don't think we want to hit you for that. There's other issues. There's other codes to enforce mufflers and things. Activities conducted on public parks and private schools. Number 6 may cause a little consternation, but it's occasional outdoor events provided such events are conducted pursuant to an appropriate license or permit by a proper department or agency. So in other words, we would develop, if there is a process to allow outdoor music, that would be exempt from the noise code. One you're probably all familiar with is the festival district. Now, we actually have within the festival district ordinances a section that says it suspends the noise code. So we don't necessarily need that for the festival district, but it would be that type of event. There's been some concerns raised about whether occasional is defined clearly enough, that maybe it should be less than X or more than X or whatever. And then 7 seems to be a little repetitive, but I guess noise from construction or maintenance when approved by the city administrator, his or her designee. So in other words, again, allowing the city administrator to approve that. And that's really, to be honest, that is the one that started this whole discussion, because the question was whether the quarry could haul at night on an issue. Well, in the past, the director of public works has just approved it. Well, of course, you know, the past practice doesn't mean it was ever in the code, so we're looking through it. Hey, this doesn't really work. But it seems like something we ought to be able to allow on a special occasion. 21-117 is a request for a variance procedures you all are kind of familiar with, and our Board of Adjustment also. Not every situation is right. The code isn't right for every situation, so we do have a variance procedure, and you can see the criteria. Degree of the consideration for the Board of Adjustment would be the degree of nuisance caused by the variance, uses of surrounding properties, amount of time to study the violation, increase the level of compliance, economic considerations, health and safety, and then number 6, there has to be some kind of an actual hardship. So you just can't say, well, I just want to be loud. There's got to be some reason that you gotta have for it. Then there's a penalty section, an injunction section, and severability. And what that would do is just replace all the other nuisance or all the other noise codes. So I'd certainly like to hear any thoughts that you have, and of course you actually have to vote on it. Ooh, good, we got Mr. Deacon already ready. Well, that's true, and that would be the reason for one of the reasons for a longer variance. 60 is not a lot. I'll say that. It could be that you know, you make an exemption for lawnmowers, but then there's always something else. I got a generator that I turn on. I'm sure it's louder than that.
I just kind of wonder how we all have gotten along for so many years and built this community. It just amazes me. It seems like every time we come in lately, we're creating a new ordinance for something.
Well, it gives me something to do.
I guess I don't know when we're going to have enough staff to administer them all, is what I'll say. With that being said, I'll go on with what Jack said. And I watched a show the other day, and they were talking in California where they have outlawed backpack blowers because of their noise. And we're talking about a riding lawnmower that I have, that Jack has, that you have, or whoever, and we're already putting stuff together that doesn't meet a requirement. I don't know.
We definitely don't want to craft something that solves a problem that doesn't exist. Where your vibrations are most of the problem usually.
Counselor, what's the present level? Is it 95 in the nuisance ordinance, the noise ordinance?
Well, the noise ordinance doesn't have any level at all. It's
level.
not decibel based, which makes it
even more difficult.
Near impossible to enforce it. Now there is some decibel levels in this zoning section, but as I said, I really don't know what it means because it seems to be balanced against one another, and it has variances of 10%, 5%. So as I read it, oh, that's just industry. Okay, well then never mind.
And tonight you're simply asking for a recommendation to take it out of the planning and zoning code, and then it'll go forward to council.
Yeah.
They will enact the ordinances.
Correct, although I certainly like to hear comments to address this stuff now, if you got any. I think there probably is some people who want to talk about it too, but.
Okay, any other questions of staff at this time? Dale?
Well, if would this affect these noise ordinances? Would this affect any businesses going on now, like DeLong's or like the quarry?
We don't believe so. Roger went out and measured Midwest Block. If you all remember, we've had a couple of those hearings for those here long enough, and they were actually in compliance. I don't believe so. Is it possible? It could be. Those are all zoned either commercial or industrial.
So we're basically, if I guess we're possibly passing changes to the zoning or the noise ordinance. If Midwest Block and Brick is in violation after that, does that mean that they would have to change their operation? Would they be grandfathered in?
They wouldn't be grandfathered in. Now, Midwest Block's a little bit different because there was, as you all probably remember, there was a suit between the city and Midwest Block about this some years ago, and so we've already got an agreement about how loud they can be. Janice is just saying they've actually taken a lot of steps to keep that noise down. But, the quarry, for example, Roger, I think, measured that one too, and they're okay. DeLong's I don't know about. We've not had any complaints. And I suppose another answer to that would be for DeLong's, for example, suppose they'd kind of be the exact thing you'd want the variance for because there's nothing around them. The damage to them would be high, and they do have a hardship because of what they do. They're, I'm not sure there's any way to make it quieter.
What would be, how would this situate? In fact, I just had this come up this afternoon.
Oh.
I had a
How fortuitous.
huge tree went down my backyard. So Hinch's come over to work the tree up. They had two chainsaws, which both chainsaws I'm sure was more than any decimals you've got on here. And then they had a chipper, huge chipper, they turn it up, on the street in front of my house. What kind of situation would that be in regard to the noise level?
I think that's an excellent point along with the lawnmower issue. If you take out the variance, then we've got a problem, I think. Because you could go up to 95 for a short time, and that would cover all those things. But if we take out the variance, then we're probably, even that's a limited time, though. So I think you're raising some good issues we need to look at. That could be. Eric just asked if lawnmower was a maintenance activity. Well, there you go. Maybe we just need to clarify that as an exemption. I guess my answer to that would be, I think I'd try to fit those couple things into the exemption time. But, I'm sure we've all been woken up by somebody mowing too early in the morning before, too.
Counselor, farm operations are also very loud, and as we annex land, we do have some farm land now. So you might want to look at a category for the farmers because you've got this thing so tight they couldn't even plow their fields with their tractors. So you might want to look at something for the farm exception.
Okay. That's a good point as well.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, any proponents here that would like to speak in favor of this proposal?
You might just have to ask for people who just want to talk about it. I'm not sure they're on either side.
Good evening. My name is Stan Idell, and I have a residence at 319C Ash Street. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak a little bit. I can't answer to the lawnmowers and everything else, but I do want to talk about, and I hope you'll bear with me as I go through this, and maybe it'll make sense when I get to the end, but I played music ever since I was in 6th grade. And, I played in Columbia, Fulton. I played in Mexico. I played at the lake. I played at the at Bones. I played at Prison Brews. I played at your Thursday night, and I do think that there needs to be something done, and I am in support of it because I recently received a letter from an attorney that stated that in part that their clients were prepared to bring suit for nuisance against our host where we were playing Prison Brews, and this letter is to put you on notice that you may be subject to liability as well. I would agree with you. I went back and looked at the ordinance. I had no clue that my band was breaking the law, that we were outside of an ordinance. And when I went back and looked at it, I still couldn't tell. So I don't know what to tell you in that case other than the fact that I know what the measurements were, and they were all within what you all are talking about, what our band was playing. Again, I live on Ash Street, and I can tell you ground noise level for a car going by on Ash Street is somewhere between 70 and 76 decibels by itself. And that kind of lines up with, obviously, you've done some due diligence because you've got those kind of numbers in here, and they kind of match up. Again, I take a place and you look at Prison Brews. I mean, what a great place. Seriously. And you're going to have more venues that want to have outside music. The music's better. I can tell you that. It's more pure. People enjoy being outside as opposed to being inside, because I can tell you many times on a noise level that I've measured since this letter that I've seen anywhere from 50 on an inside crowd in a restaurant all the way up to and above 80. So, obviously, again, people want to be outside. And I think that's important. And I think it's important not only for places like Prison Brews, as I said, but other places that may come along and want to start the same kind of venue. Maybe part of the problem is us, because the first time we played there, I think we had 25 people. Well, it's certainly changed from then. And I think that's what you all want. I think you want that commerce coming into Jeff City. And I think you want people that come in to have a good time and know they can go a place where they're safe and they can enjoy themselves. So I think it's important from the standpoint of guidance, not only for the neighbors, because I certainly think that they need to know and they need to feel protected, and that's what, government should do somewhat. But I think it's important for the police, so they aren't making calls on those type of situations, as opposed to other things that are more important. I think it's important for businesses, no matter what venue you're talking about, and I think it's important for entertainment. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Idell? Thank you. Anyone else that would like to testify on this proposal? Come forward, please.
My name is Michael Brownstein, and I live at 320 Ash Street in Jeff City, kitty corner to Prison Brews. And one reason why this got more involved is because my neighbors and myself have called about the sound from the patio on many, many occasions. I have a decibel machine. I stood in front of my house at 320 Ash. Now, there's no charts here, so I'll try to show you another way, I guess. Prison Brews is over here, okay? Then there's a house here, an alley, a house here, and my house. Prison Brews is here. They're playing outside. The music might be pure as heck inside of that place, but by the time it reaches me over here, it's loud and it's vented and it's not good at all. A neighbor who lives over here in 325 Ash has called the police many times because it actually makes her physically sick. That's why we want to do something about this. 85 is way too loud. And according to my records, what I found is different organizations will actually say that at 85, you're in health endangerment, at 90, you're in more endangerment. But I want to say one more thing first. I never called the police unless my decimal machine showed 100 in front of my house. So here's Prison Brews, 305 Ash, here's 320 Ash, halfway down the block, and we're getting at 100 decibels here. The argument about lawnmowers, yeah, I use a lawnmower, and it's loud, but that's a variance because we have to do construction. When they worked on my house, not my house, but the house next door on the roof, starting at 6 in the morning, we didn't call the police. They were working on the roof. That was a job that had to be done. It was very hot this summer. Why would we say it's disturbing our peace when we want the people to get their house fixed? Who's going to work at 110 degrees at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? So that's a variance to me. The chipper for the tree. There's no question about that. You want to get your tree fixed, taken out of your yard, this is a variance. But putting music on a patio and not concerning yourself with how the neighbors hear it or feel about it, the vibrating windows, the sick lady over here who complains to me all the time. I have a letter from somebody from Chestnut, a block away, saying, I called the police and I wanted them to tell me why they couldn't stop the music. So this is an issue with us. The second issue that my neighborhood has is this 10 o'clock. Now, if you look at the new, I want to go back, I'm sorry. There is, contrary to what everybody says, I can't find it because it was organized a minute ago. Here it is. In the zoning law for nuisance noise, in C, which I guess you don't have a copy of, but you can make a copy of this for me and run it back to them? Is this possible? Okay. In 21-110C, it says, 50 feet from the source of the noise measured in a straight line. I'm not a straight line, I'm kitty corner. I'm way more than 50 feet. 305 Ash, 314 Ash Alley, 316 Ash, 320 Ash, 325 Ash. I think 319 Ash is here. Okay, it's very loud. When the Mission, which is down the street from our house, opens its doors, we could hear the music. And it's very, very loud. And people in Eastside Terrace now, the problem is they call me up and they say, Michael, what are we going to do about this? And I say, well, you got to call the police. They think it's only me doing this. You follow what I'm saying? And I've stood by them a few times when the police were called because they wanted me to be by them. So when Rebecca Bushman called the police in early summertime because it was so loud, I was with her. When Elisha from Eastside Terrace called the police on Mission, I was with her. I do call the police. I won't tell a story. And I used to give the courtesy of going to Prison Brews and saying, please lower the sound. And I'll tell you why I stopped doing that. Because the last time I did that, the gentleman who's the manager said, I don't care what you do, call the police. So we did. We were wanting to work it out, you follow me? We wanted to work out the whole thing, and he said call the police. So we did. I understand that since then he's been fired. Thank you. Okay, we appreciate that. We don't mind Prison Brews. We don't mind the congestion of the parking, believe it or not. They complain about this to people who live in the neighborhood because in Jeff City, you're used to parking in front of your house. Okay? So you park down the street. We're won't come to an end. You park around the corner. The people living next to me, when they can't find a place to park, are allowed to park behind my house. I've told them this. There's no problem with this. So congestion is not the problem. We like the fact that the city is making money off Prison Brews. We do like that a lot. We like that it's a tourist attraction. We don't want it to go away. All we want is the music electronically off the patio and bring it inside. And this noise ordinance at 85 to 95, and according to some of my stuff, this one didn't have a, this other chart I have over here that I didn't get to you, it actually says at 90 to 95, sustained exposure may result in hearing loss. That's why when the guy was doing the chipper, he had something over, I hope, he was wearing something over his ears. When I was at R. Donnelly, we put earplugs in our ears in the factory. We did this. Okay, but that's part of how it works. Music is not a variance. They can go inside. And what maybe they don't understand is it bounces. And when the windows start vibrating really hard, we get nervous. And when a woman across the street tells me, I'm sick of this, I'm literally sick, I've got to get in my car and drive somewhere else because I can't stand it anymore, this scares me. 85 is too loud. Now, there's variances. I agree with this. But every code we looked at, myself and some other people, for the most part, every residential area was 55 to 65. Industrial went from, I think industrial was, the highest was 70, but commercial was always lower than industrial. This is the first time ever, I mean, not the first time ever, because there's millions of these, that I've seen where commercial is louder than industrial. And it has a chance to peak for 10. Now, here's the other funny thing. If I call the police on Prison Brews again, and I'm going to tell you, when I get loud, I'm going to do it, because I'm going to take my thing out. Only now I have a decibel. I'm not doing 50 feet anymore. I've measured the 50 feet. I know exactly how far 50 feet is from their wall. I've done all that, okay? I've had my lawyer walk it, and she's measured it. So there is a code 50 feet from the house. But now with the decibels, when if it's 100 and I call the police at 85, I'll be doing it a lot quicker, all right? I don't believe it's 85. Now, the gentleman who took the readings at Prison Brews did two things. He took the reading 5 feet from the wall, and I'll be honest with you, when you go to Prison Brews and hear the music, and you walk in front of it, it gets quieter at 314. Remember, here's 305. Here's 314. Here's the patio. It's quieter here than it is here. The second reading he took was behind Prison Brews, the back fence, where it was 78, 79. Interestingly enough, a neighbor from not even near me, who ran for alderman or councilman, he called me and said, "Are you complaining about the noise? I hear it in my backyard, and I'm a half mile away. And it's making the old lady who lives next door to me very nervous." I said, "Then call the police, or come here and we'll do it together." So that's my first issue. My second issue is we're going to define daytime now from 7 a.m. to 10 o'clock at night for everything. We're going to say construction workers could do construction work until 10 o'clock at night. That's what the new code says. But if you look at the thing here, there's a contradiction. It says 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock, and then lower down in the new draft, which is somewhere on this desk here, okay? It says, I'm talking about 21-116C, it's 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then somewhere else, I think it says 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. I can't find that one. Am I over?
We're normally allowed 5 minutes.
Okay,
I've let
I'm
you go
sorry.
quite a bit over. Could
Okay,
you
I'm
kinda
sorry,
wrap
but
it up, sir, please?
I just,
And then the commissioners will ask you
that's all I wanted to
questions.
do. I just wanted to be consistent time. So I would go with 9 o'clock, and I would go with 65 across the board for everybody, and I'll be happy. Okay? That's all I have to say.
Any commissioners have any questions?
I'm sorry. I thought you said 10 minutes earlier, but I must have misunderstood. And I talk fast, so I get a lot in, okay?
Okay. Well, you were over 10, so.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I was being gracious to you.
Well, I'm appreciative.
All right.
Is there any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any comment on this? Any other comments? We'll close the public testimony. Staff report.
Actually, in this one, there's no staff report, really. I guess I'd like you to suggest we move this on to the council, but you can do what you like. We have to have your vote because it does change the zoning code.
Okay, and we're simply tonight, we're taking it out of the planning code and we're gonna move it forward to the council.
Correct.
And they will enact the ordinance regarding the noise.
However they enact it, correct.
So, the way I understand this is procedural. Any commissioners have any questions about it? Jave?
I guess two. One, I'm assuming all this discussion will again take place on the council level.
I'm quite confident of that.
So, and the other thing, which, and Chris may rephrase this, but he mentioned this, and I had kind of the same question, is this will then be in the zoning?
Nope.
That's why I was confused.
This will be in the nuisance code.
Okay.
It'll replace what currently exists in the nuisance code.
And
But it'll
how does
take
that-
out any noise stuff from the zoning
From
code.
the zoning, that's what, okay, I see. I missed.
So sadly, you guys won't get to talk about noise anymore.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm all in favor then.
Yeah, I make a motion. I make a motion for approval of the proposal zoning code amendment.
Discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Unanimously passes. Case P 12016, preliminary subdivision plat, Loggy Ridge subdivision. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to direct your attention to the revised staff report for the planning staff report. And I believe there's an engineering staff report behind it, as well as a determination regarding cul-de-sac length, being as the cul-de-sacs that they're proposing within the subdivision happen to be more than 800 feet long. But up on the screen is a location map showing the property in question. First, to orient you to the location, over on the right-hand side of the screen is Southwest Boulevard. And if you follow my mouse pointer, right there is the intersection of Southwest Boulevard and Route C. Schulte's IGA is right there. So if you travel down Route C a ways and look off to the north or to the right, there's a farm field, and that is the property that is being proposed for a subdivision. Currently zoned RS2, which is a single-family residential zoning district, and that is what they're proposing, a single-family residential subdivision. This is an aerial photo, kind of close-up view of the property. It's bounded by Route C, mostly along the south, and by Veith Drive on the west. There are a couple single-family homes down here in to the southwest of the property, which are located off of a short extension of Southridge Drive off of Veith. And up on the screen is the actual preliminary subdivision plat. This is the application that's filed by the property owner, James Loggy. Again, it's for a preliminary plat of 32.6 acres and a total of 56 single-family residential lots, and one reserve tract that would be the site of a stormwater detention basin. The plat shows, well, basically the street layout and the utility layout that's proposed for the property. The property basically be developed in two parts, two halves. The first half would be over on the west side of the property. That's what the developer is got in mind as the final platting first and proceeding with development of the first half of the subdivision, and then at a later date coming in and final platting the other half of the subdivision, but laying it all out on the preliminary plat to begin with. There's two primary cul-de-sacs, I'll call them, one off of Veith Drive and one off of Route C, and then off of each of those primary cul-de-sacs is a secondary cul-de-sac, very short stub, that accesses additional lots. And the smallest lot is just over 12,000 square feet. All of the lots meet the minimum size of 10,000 square feet and minimum width of 80 feet of width at the front of the lot for the RS2 district. There are sidewalks shown on one side of all of the new streets, and then also along the side of Veith Drive adjacent to the subdivision. So sidewalks are shown on the plan according to city code, and also street lights and fire hydrants and all the other necessary utilities. There is a greenway access easement that has been shown on the plat, and it's kind of hard to see, but if you follow my mouse pointer, you'll see that there's a greenway access easement along the north side of the property, and then it stubs out to each of the primary, or I'm sorry, to two of the cul-de-sac bulbs, one right here, and then one right here, and the thought there being that that there could potentially be a greenway to the north of the property at some future date. It's if you look north of the property, and I've got a bit of a expanded area view that shows the subject property highlighted here at the bottom. But if you look north, you see it's fairly undeveloped. It's pretty rough terrain. It's a creek. It seems just like an ideal place for a future greenway. Now the Parks Department doesn't have any plans for a greenway at this date, but they have looked at it in the past, and so in order to accommodate connection of the subdivision into that greenway and allow future residents to access that. We thought it'd be important to try to establish some sort of connectivity in that regard. What that ultimately ends up looking like, could potentially change. We're certainly willing to discuss details on that with the developer, but providing some sort of connection seems something that would be a benefit for those residents and the city as a whole. As I mentioned, there the two primary cul-de-sacs happen to exceed the maximum length that's outlined within the subdivision code of 800 feet for a cul-de-sac. And as we've done several times before for subdivisions in our community, given the rough terrain, the applicant's requesting a variance from that requirement in order to have a cul-de-sac that in both cases just slightly exceeds the 800 feet. I think that this one right here is 1,100 feet long, and then the one to the west is 900 feet long. But it technically would require a variance from that requirement, which you all have the authority to issue. I think I've touched on most of the major elements of the subdivision plat. Mr. Marash is here in Mr. Wade's place. If there's any engineering issues he'd like to touch on, or if you have any engineering questions, certainly be willing to answer any initial questions that you have.
Anyone have any questions of Eric at this time? Engineering?
Yeah, I can just give you a brief overview of the engineering staff report. I think it's in the packet, but basically the infrastructure in the area is generally accessible and would be available to serve the subdivision. A few of the kind of finer details, maybe as Eric touched on, there is a proposed track for a detention basin where there's an existing pond. It's my understanding the owner's probably wanting to drain that pond, and then it would be replaced with a dry detention basin that the city would maintain, which is typical of residential subdivisions, detention basins. Closed stormwater system. Some of the details would have to be ironed out, of course, as we go through the plan development. But the sanitary sewers, they're available, they're in the area. The one thing we did request is some additional easements so that a future extension could be made to some existing houses that aren't part of the subdivision. Eric's pointing to it. So that oftentimes in those large lots, if we have, drain fields or whatever for their sewers, we'll request the developer plat easements so that can be extended in the future. He's done so on this preliminary. Again, touched on the greenway. We would work with the developer and their engineer to make sure those are accessible in the future. And sidewalks along Veith are a key component that we would like to see, and he's included those, I believe, on here, or will include them. As far as streets and traffic, again, one of our concerns was just the lots fronting directly on Veith would have some turnarounds, and that would have to be a note on the preliminary plat. Eric had pointed those. There are a few lots that front directly on Veith. But in other instances, we've done this where we've had the driveways had to include turnarounds, so you're not backing out into the street, basically on a collector or type street. And that's really all I have, just as an overview. If you have any particular questions, we can answer them.
Do you have any questions for the engineer?
Part of this preliminary plat, are there sidewalks involved with each street too? Is that part of?
Right. On the streets, would be sidewalk on one side of each street. I'm not sure about the shorter cul-de-sacs, Eric, are there?
Yes, we do require sidewalk along one side of all new streets. It's only required on one side and only has to be 4 feet wide. But yeah, it's shown according to the code.
Is there any, and it sounds like there isn't, but just out of curiosity, is there any concern about the entrance on to Route C and traffic?
That entrance would obviously be permitted by MoDOT, and they would look at that. Now, when we do have an entrance on the plan, we will have them also note the site distances on Veith Drive for us as well as for those driveways, and that's why we want some of the turnarounds. But we always have the engineer put those on there so we can check them against what's required. And I think we're meeting minimums here. But we'd still like to have the turnarounds, just so you're not backing out on that type of a street. Now, but again, MoDOT, on your question, would look at that and evaluate. They wouldn't allow it unless it were met certain criterias.
Any other questions to staff at this time? Thank you. Okay, who is here to present this proposal? Mr. Bates?
Mr. Chairman, Mike Bates, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. I think staff, engineering, and planning have covered all of the issues. The Loggies are here tonight. Interestingly enough, all of the projects we had tonight are infill development, and while this is not in the core of the city, it's certainly been here a long time without any potential development. The terrain does get significantly steep down in the draws as you go to the northeast of the property. We have had preliminary discussions with MoDOT. That is a permitted access and would be directly across from Meadow Lake Drive, which is another street, residential street just across the roadway. The cross section on C is a 3-lane cross section with the protected left, and given the density of the development, the projected traffic, we don't believe that's any problem, and we've, like I said, had preliminary contact with MoDOT because the access is permitted. So we think we're within their guidelines. Be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Loggie's here tonight to supplement the testimony if you have questions of him.
Any questions, Mr. Bates? I appreciate you taking care of the pond down there.
Ponds are an issue tonight. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else here that would like to speak in favor of this proposal? You want to speak, Mr. Loggie?
I'm Jim Loggie from Loggie 50 Loggie Lane, Mary's home, and I built about 130 homes near Jeff City here, and I'd like to keep the tree boundary around the outside, and we was looking at houses around 200,000, you know, and that's about, you know, just wanted to keep it kind of remote sitting there, so I think it's nice. I've said for the last years, I thought that piece was the best piece in town, so it's that's what I had in mind, so thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Loggie? Okay, thank you. Anyone else here who would like to speak in favor of this proposal? Anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this proposal? Seeing none, we'll close the public testimony. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were under a pretty tight time frame in terms of, on the staff level, in terms of review of this subdivision proposal. We bounced it back and forth to the consultant several times, getting various things addressed. The last version, we have not had an opportunity to go through and make sure all the fine details are in order, but all the major elements are in place, and pending correction of minor details with regards to notes, et cetera, on the plat. We'd recommend approval of the subdivision plat. Now, the form of motion you'll see in the revised staff report, that actually two separate motions. The first one dealing with the variance to the cul-de-sac lengths, the motion for approval of the requested variance from the maximum cul-de-sac length for the proposed June Court and Trenton Court, and then the second motion for approval of the preliminary subdivision plat with following condition: compliance with comments and technical corrections of the Planning and Engineering Division. And Mr. Wade is on vacation, so he did not have an opportunity to go over those fine details before he left, and that's the main thing that needs to be looked at. So.
Any questions of Eric? Engineering, you have anything else? Mr. Bates, Mr. Loggie, you have any problem with any of this? Okay.
Oh, if I may, in discussions with the developer and the consultant, I believe that the final plat for the first section of this would be coming back at you very soon, possibly next month or certainly the one after that. So.
Okay, any more questions? I think we'll do this in form of two motions, and we'll first motion would be for the approval of the variance for the cul-de-sac, and then we'll do the motion for the preliminary subdivision plat. Who would want to take that on?
I would move that we approve the variance in the length of the cul-de-sacs on June Court and Trenton Court as presented on the preliminary plat.
I second.
Have a motion and a second. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Let's go to the second motion, Dave.
I would move that we approve the preliminary plat of Loggy Ridge subdivision as presented, subject to any staff recommendations or technical corrections.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Other business, scheduled reports, Environmental Quality Commission. Mr. Lester is not here tonight. Does someone have that report?
Nope, we rely on Mr. Lester.
All right, well, let's put that back on the agenda for next month then.
Sounds good.
Okay, discussion of possible zoning code amendments. We have anything of that?
I do not have anything for you this evening. I do appreciate you all being here for a late meeting,
Thank you, Eric.
and sure like to get out of here myself.
Okay.
I would like to talk more about solar power.
Anything else? Okay, thanks for the very, very long meeting. We're adjourned. We'll see you next month.